It's a great honor to introduce you and welcome you all to the Gulf Futures Forum. In light of the recent crisis between Russia and Ukraine, the obvious question is, why the Gulf? Why Iran? Why the GCC? What's the relevance? Surely the European crisis is much more relevant. However, there is naturally a butterfly effect that people readily identify in geography, and yet they fail to recognize it in geopolitics. And a perfect example of that butterfly effect in geopolitics is Ali Shamkhani, the secretary of Iran's powerful Supreme National Security Council, who tweeted that Iran is seeking creative ways to restore its nuclear deal with world powers after Russia's foreign minister linked sanctions on Moscow over its war on Ukraine to the ongoing negotiations. Ali Shamkhani can afford to be creative as the US Congress in Europe rejects importing Russian oil. The international oil market now needs Iranian oil. As a result, energy markets are torn between escalation between Russia and Ukraine or rapprochement between the US and Iran. Russia can choose between two different scenarios: leverage the US and the international community to reduce sanctions, and in turn it supports the US position at Vienna and restrains Iran, or Russia uses Iran as an anti-Western tool as sanctions drives Russia closer to Iran. The war in Ukraine will lead to the total collapse of negotiations in Vienna, spurring the Biden administration to make endless concessions to just create an agreement. In turn, Russia and Iran may gravitate closer to China, creating a modern-day non-aligned state system, a kind of anti-Western bounded order that we saw in the Cold War. In this scenario, Russia, Iran, and China all seek to develop an alternative to SWIFT, while Russia enables Iran to increase its military threat by selling it the Su-35 fighter jets and the S-400 anti-missile defense systems that until now it was very reticent to sell to Iran. Furthermore, Russia can invest in Iran's energy projects. Currently, it's a lose-lose situation for the liberal international order. Iran's position in Vienna will be informed by the Biden administration's pattern of policy failures ranging from the US's withdrawal from Afghanistan and empowerment of the Taliban, and inaction regarding to China's takeover of Hong Kong. It very much is reticent to Osama bin Laden's critique of the United States being a paper tiger and not having staying power. Iran echoes this sentiment, and to this end, Iran hardly fears repercussions for wielding its proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, to escalate its terrorist activities across the Gulf and the broader Middle East. The US may respond to the Russia-Ukraine crisis in two different ways. It may prioritize preventing World War III by prioritizing the Russian threat and thereby softening its positions in Vienna in an attempt to decouple Iran from Russia. This is likely to be a failed policy and ultimately work to Iran's advantage, that in turn will pose an uptick in risk across the Middle East. Alternatively, the US may seek Russian support to reach a deal in Vienna, which also works in Iran's favor. I see the Gulf and broader Middle East mired in risk as disruption has become the norm and the international system is coming apart at the seams. And when I say that, I'm referring to multiple disruptions that have reinforced previous disruptions. In Europe, there was Brexit, then COVID, then energy prices and people, or energy shortages and people waiting at the fuel tanks, and now the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. This is going to escalate more and more, and very frequently we consider a risk in one area at the expense of the other area, and we try to look at the international community in a very siloed manner. We think in terms of Russia and Ukraine and not Iran and the Gulf. However, when we use these cliches such as globalization, the international community is intertwined, and there is a ripple effect that is taking place from one end of the international community to the other. And that ripple effect becomes far more pronounced when the United States doesn't or refuses to assert its primacy in the international system. And that's something that Iran and other actors, such as even China or North Korea, albeit not in the same category as China, will exploit. And the terrifying scenario, being a strategist, one needs to consider worst case scenario first, is the confluence of all these, the convergence of all these trends and all these actors coming together to leverage one another or leverage the United States in order not to take measures against them. That is a nightmare scenario, which I think that we're on the beginning, on the cusp of. And that's a result of the United States and the international order really taking quite a nonchalant and non-interventionist approach to foreign policy and allowing Iran to increase its uranium enrichment, to perhaps unravel sanctions, offering them the finances to fund their proxies, which in turn creates greater escalation. This has enormous implications for trade and multiple industries across the Middle East. And that is what this conference, the Gulf Futures Forum, is geared towards addressing. And on that positive note, I am very proud to welcome you to the Gulf Futures Forum. Thank you.